Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's a privilege to rise today and support the position the Australian government has taken in relation to the attacks that the Houthis have been issuing on global commerce in our region. It is, of course, a problem for this government and our foreign policy in Australia that they have decided not to extend that moral support and ethical support to our partners and allies, the United States and many other countries who are being impacted by these terrorist attacks backed by Iran in the Red Sea. Now, why is this important, Madam Deputy Speaker? Well, this is very important because Australia has a very important role to play in the world today in relation to foreign policy. We are, of course, regarded as one of the most successful economies, societies, and certainly in our region, an enormous influence over many other parts of the world, but also primarily in Australia's own direct self-interest is our attachment to global commerce and indeed shipping. It's very important to note that most of our goods and services imported to this country come by ship. It's part of Australia's passion to import goods and services from all around the world and export many too, including a lot of produce. We do rely on global shipping. It's a golden seam of commerce that runs around the world, the free trade system that enables so much prosperity, the ability to feed so many people around the world. Millions and hundreds of millions of people are better off because of the security and safety of global shipping routes. So when a state-sponsored group attacks shipping, commerce, the production of goods and services, the flow of goods and services through a critical route like in the Red Sea, it is in Australia's direct interests to respond. I agree with the Shadow Minister Simon Birmingham, who said that the incomplete lack of involvement directly on the ground is woefully inadequate. But I actually think that's the polite version, because listening to the Greens, we've seen the real issue, of course, is they have this notion that if we somehow respond to a terror group attacking global shipping, undermining the entire free trade commerce system that exists in the modern world, that we would be somehow violating peace in the world today. That it would be more peaceful to allow terrorists to storm other people's ships with missiles, guns and hold people at hostage and steal their productive goods and services from their economies and take it for themselves, that this would be a violation of peace if we tried to interdict that. That's the position of the Australian Greens, obviously somehow taken up by this government. I do think it's disturbing that investigations have revealed that the Prime Minister who received this request, his department received it through the usual channels from the United States, who have taken direct action in relation to this, chose not to respond directly. And that is that the PMNC reported that there was no response from the Prime Minister in relation to this. It was left to the Defence Minister to decide that we couldn't or wouldn't provide a naval vessel to stop what is in effect piracy, but when it's sponsored by another state actor, it has to take on a different characteristic. And when you think about the record of the ADF and the governments of Australia in the past, we have, of course, had ships involved in the Middle East for a long time fighting piracy. Piracy is an ongoing problem. But this is a new threat, a distinct threat, something that will push up the price of all the goods that are travelling by ship. In fact, containers are already feeling the impact all around the world, container shipping, the cost per container rising, and the risk of the loss of production and safety in global commerce has a huge cost. So why would we leave it to the United States, to India, to Canada, to countries around the world to do something about it when we are so reliant on global shipping ourselves? On any benchmark, it is in Australia's direct interests to respond to what is happening with force in that Red Sea with our allies and partners who are committed to the free, safe passage of international shipping, a principle that we thought would have absolute bipartisanship. It isn't enough for the government to issue a press release and say this is terrible and we have conceptual support when actually Australia's direct interests are being violated as well. But if we look at the interests of so many of our allies and partners and peace in the region, we would absolutely contradict the Greens, and we call on the government to stare down the leaders of the Greens as well. Not only has our live export shipping been affected, not only has our productive and exports been affected, but we will see cost per container rising. We call on the government to do something, not just to talk about it, not spiritual support, but to commit to real action with our partners, the United